We still don't know what it is or where it comes from, but there's something there. It's been tracked around the Earth by radar, traveling at a rate of 4,000 miles an hour. This is not another flying saucer scare. Scientists and military men are already agreed on that. Whatever it is, it's something real.
In 1951, a flying saucer landed in Washington, D.C., and cinema was never the same. The Day the Earth Stood Still wasn't about monsters or ray guns. It was a warning. Stop fighting or face destruction. Cold War fears, atomic anxiety, and a desperate plea for peace turned this into more than just a sci-fi flick. It became a mirror, showing humanity its own chaos through the eyes of an alien and his unstoppable robot. And behind the camera, the story gets even wilder. Political blacklists, gibberish that became legend, and design tricks decades ahead of their time. These are 20 weird and hidden facts about the day the Earth stood still. The film's real-life tensions and Cold War core. The world of 1951 was a powder keg, and the film was born directly from that fear. World War II had just ended, but the dawn of the atomic bomb and the escalating Cold War between the United States and the Soviet Union had replaced it with a new, simmering anxiety. The fear of total annihilation wasn't just in the headlines. It was a palpable dread in every American living room. Producer Julian Blaustein saw this global tension and knew that the source material, the short story Farewell to the Master, was more than just a sci-fi tale. It was a perfect vehicle for a powerful message. He pushed to adapt it into a film that would serve as a direct warning to humanity about its new and terrifying obsession with bigger bombs and endless, self-destructive conflict. The alien Klaatu wasn't just a character. He was conceived as a cinematic messenger, a neutral arbiter sent to look humanity in the eye and say, "Enough is enough." So when the saucer lands and is immediately met with suspicion and military force, it wasn't fantasy. It was a direct reflection of the world outside the theater. The on-screen violence and paranoia mirrored the real-life political climate, and audiences suddenly realized this wasn't a story about outer space at all. It was a story about them. The radical short story, origins and a different robot name. Before the saucer, before Gort, before Klaatu ever set foot on Earth, there was a short story. Harry Bates's Farewell to the Master hit the pages of the pulp magazine Astounding Science Fiction in 1940, and it completely flipped the script on what an alien story could be. Up to that point, extraterrestrials in fiction were usually hostile monsters, creatures meant to invade, conquer, or annihilate. But Bates gave readers something radical and new, an alien who wasn't a destroyer, but a protector. He created a being who arrived not with death rays and declarations of war, but with a quiet dignity and a profound mission to save humanity from itself. This concept of a benevolent, superior alien intelligence was groundbreaking, and here's the kicker for die-hard fans. In the original story, the powerful, silent robot that would become a cinematic icon wasn't named Gort at all. He was called Gnut, one small, simple name change later. Cinema gained one of its most legendary and recognizable robots. And the science fiction genre gained a new, more thoughtful and complex kind of alien story. The title shuffle, from journey to the world to an iconic phrase names matter in Hollywood. And believe it or not, The Day the Earth Stood Still almost didn't sound that epic. During development, the studio toyed with a number of much less inspiring titles. One option was to simply use the title of the original short story, Farewell to the Master. Another, even clunkier, option was Journey to the World. It wasn't until late in the development process that the now iconic and unforgettable title finally stuck. It was simple, urgent, and deeply mysterious. The Day the Earth Stood Still promised an event so massive, so globally significant, that the planet itself would freeze in awe. Imagine if they hadn't changed it. Would a movie called Journey to the World have burned itself into the collective memory of cinema history? Probably not. A great title doesn't just label a film. Sometimes it can decide its entire destiny, and in this case, it perfectly captured the film's monumental sense of importance. The unlikely director, a Western filmmaker, takes the helm. The director chosen for this sci-fi epic, Robert Wise, was not a sci-fi guy. In fact, fresh off directing a Civil War Western, he was the last person you would expect to take the wheel of a spaceship. But when the studio, 20th Century Fox, handed him the script, he saw more than just aliens and robots. He saw a chance to say something urgent and important about the dawning of the atomic age. Wise later admitted in interviews that the story's powerful message hooked him instantly. Here was a film that used the spectacle of science fiction, not just to entertain, but to deliver a serious and necessary warning to a world on the brink of destroying itself. Under his steady and intelligent direction, the film's message of peace, restraint, and sanity cut through louder than any explosion or special effect. Looking back, it was a career-defining gamble that paid off. The very same man who would go on to direct the beloved musicals West Side Story and The Sound of Music first shook the world with the quiet arrival of a flying saucer. The genre of science fiction has never been the same since. The military's rejection of the film's anti-war message. When Klaatu's saucer touches down on the National Mall in Washington, D.C., it is immediately surrounded by soldiers, tanks, and heavy artillery. It looks like the full might of the US military on high alert. Except it wasn't. In a telling behind-the-scenes drama, the Pentagon flat-out refused to cooperate with the production in any way. Officials read the script and did not like what they saw. A story that was deeply critical of violence, suspicion, and armed conflict, and one that portrayed the military as being dangerously trigger-happy. The filmmakers had to get creative, borrowing the necessary military equipment from the 3rd Armored Cavalry Regiment at Fort Meade instead of receiving official support. It was a quiet act of rebellion baked right into the movie's production. The ultimate irony is that a film about the dangers of unchecked fear and aggression was rejected by a real-world institution for being too honest about that very same fear. And the casting what-ifs and the search for an unknown face. When casting for the crucial role of the alien visitor Klaatu began, the studio wanted a familiar, bankable face. Hollywood heavyweights like Spencer Tracy and Claude Rains were at the very top of the list to bring instant gravitas and star power. For a moment, it looked like Earth's alien messenger would be a big-name star. But director Robert Wise and producer Julian Blaustein had other ideas. They argued that a famous, recognizable face would bring the baggage of past roles and prevent the audience from fully believing they were watching a visitor from another world. They needed an enigma. That choice led them to the British actor Michael Rennie, whose calm, dignified, and otherworldly presence gave Klaatu his quiet, compelling power. Looking back, it was the perfect gamble. Rennie wasn't a superstar, but he became immortal in that role, precisely because he felt so genuinely alien to American audiences. The giggles that almost ruined the most famous line actress, Patricia Neal, who played the film's heroine, Helen Benson, didn't think she was making a masterpiece. To her, it felt like just another cheap saucer flick, and she struggled to take the material seriously. This became a real problem when it came time to film the now iconic scene where she must deliver the alien command, Klaatu Barada Nikto, to the robot Gort. Neal later admitted in interviews that she struggled to say the line with a straight face, finding the made-up alien words to be completely ridiculous. The situation was made worse by her co-star, Michael Rennie, who, standing tall and serious as Klaatu, would reportedly tease her with dry humor whenever she cracked a smile during a take. What looked deadly serious and full of tension on screen was, behind the camera, a scene nearly derailed by uncontrollable giggles. And yet, that very moment became the film's most legendary command. The strange words she nearly laughed through turned into one of the most famous and endlessly quoted phrases in the history of science fiction. The gentle giant inside the terrifying Gort. Behind the towering, metallic menace of the robot Gort wasn't a machine at all, but a man named Locke Martin, who was famously an usher at Grauman's Chinese theater. He stood over 7 feet tall, and his size alone was perfect for a seemingly indestructible robot. But inside that bulky and imposing suit, the role was anything but easy. The costume was made of thick foam rubber, laced up from the front and back, which trapped an immense amount of heat and made it nearly impossible to move. Martin would get so weak and overheated inside the suit that director Robert Wise had to schedule frequent breaks just to keep him on his feet. Even the iconic scene where Gort effortlessly lifts Helen Benson wasn't real strength. The actress was actually supported by hidden wires and, in some shots, was replaced by a lightweight dummy. Despite the immense physical struggle, Martin's performance stuck. The gentle giant, who was known for his kind demeanor on set, gave science fiction one of its most iconic and terrifying robots. The real, complex science on the professor's blackboard. In most science fiction movies of the era, blackboards full of equations were just meaningless scribbles, designed to look scientific. Not here. When the brilliant Professor Barnhart fills his office blackboard with complex formulas, every single mark on that board was rooted in real, high-level astrophysics. The filmmakers, in their quest for authenticity, hired a UCLA scientist, Dr. Samuel Herrick, to supply them with completely authentic calculations. What you see on that board is his real research on the three-body problem, one of the most notoriously difficult and chaotic puzzles in celestial mechanics. Even Klaatu's quiet correction of the math on the board was designed by Dr. Herrick to feel plausible, not like Hollywood fluff. And here's the kicker. The actor Sam Jaffe, who played Professor Barnhart, had actually taught mathematics himself before becoming an actor. So when he stood there and stared at those complex equations, he wasn't just acting. He actually understood them. The MPA's divine intervention and forced rewrite. When the alien Klaatu is shot and later brought back to life by Gort's advanced technology, it's one of the film's most powerful and memorable moments. But the censors at the Motion Picture Production Code, the powerful censorship board of the era, were not impressed. They were nervous. The very idea of a character who seemed to have unlimited power over life and death felt a little too close to divine, godlike territory for their comfort. So, the filmmakers were forced to rewrite the scene. They added a crucial line of dialogue where Klaatu clarifies that his resurrection is only temporary and that the ultimate power over life and death is reserved for the Almighty Spirit. It was a small, seemingly minor tweak, but it was enough to calm the religious fears of the censors. Funnily enough, that forced compromise didn't weaken the story. In some ways, it gave it more edge. Because now Klaatu wasn't a god. He was just a messenger with a warning. The spaceship's secret connection to a famous architect. The spaceship in the day the Earth stood still wasn't just a movie prop. It was conceived as architecture from the future. The film's production designer, Thomas Little, actually consulted with none other than Frank Lloyd Wright, America's most famous and visionary architect, to help shape the saucer's unique look. The result was a ship so smooth and seamless that it felt almost organic and alive. Wright's core idea, which was revolutionary at the time, was that the saucer should appear to heal itself, with doors and ramps that left no visible trace or seam once they were closed. That's why the craft in the film looks like a single unbroken shell, a design that was decades ahead of the minimalism that would later become popular. It wasn't just a futuristic design, it was a believable one, and that's the magic of it. A spaceship designed with the principles of a work of art, not just a children's toy. The film's haunting and radical soundtrack. From the very first eerie, sliding notes of the opening credits, this film sounds different. That haunting, humming score wasn't just background music, it was a radical sonic experiment. The composer, the legendary Bernard Herrmann, built an orchestra like no one had ever seen or heard before. He used not one, but two theremins, the strange electronic instrument you play without touching. He added in electric strings, multiple organs, vibraphones, and even reversed audio tracks to create a sound that was truly and deeply alien. Audiences in 1951, accustomed to sweeping romantic orchestras, had never heard anything like it. And here's the legacy. That strange electronic sound became the undisputed blueprint for decades of science fiction to come. Every weird, humming alien sound you hear in later films owes a quiet debt to Bernard Herrmann's groundbreaking work on this film. He didn't just score a movie. He invented the very sound of space itself. The blacklisted professor who almost got cut from the film Professor Barnhart, the Einstein-like genius who was the first human to truly listen to and understand Klaatu's message, was played by the talented character actor Sam Jaffe. But getting him into the movie was almost impossible. In the paranoid days of the Red Scare and the Hollywood Blacklist, Jaffe had been accused of having communist sympathies and was blacklisted for refusing to testify before the House Un-American Activities Committee. The studio, terrified of the political fallout, worried that his name alone could sink the film. But the director, Robert Wise, and the producer, Julian Blaustein, stood firm. They wanted Jaffe for the role, and they fought for him. A risky and principled stand in a town consumed by fear. The irony is almost too perfect. A movie that is a powerful critique of fear and prejudice almost lost its central voice of reason due to real-world fear and prejudice. The gibberish that became a legend. The origin of Klaatu Barada Nikto. It's arguably the most famous line in the entire movie, yet it means absolutely nothing at all. The screenwriter, Edmund H. North, simply made up the alien words, Klaatu Barada Nikto, because he thought they sounded strange, rhythmic, and authentically alien. There was no secret code, no hidden language, just pure, creative invention. But audiences loved the mystery of the phrase, and it took on a life of its own. It has been referenced and parodied in countless films and TV shows since, from being used as character names in Star Wars to becoming a running gag in the cult classic Army of Darkness. It's one of those rare and magical moments where a piece of complete nonsense became a cultural legend. And to think that the actress Patricia Neal nearly giggled through her delivery. Her line, born out of nothing, grew into one of the most iconic and recognizable commands in the history of science fiction. A box office. Success on a surprisingly modest budget. The Day the Earth Stood Still was not made on a blockbuster budget. With just over $1 million behind it, the studio expected a solid, but not spectacular sci-fi picture, not a cultural milestone. But audiences, hungry for a more intelligent kind of science fiction, packed the theaters. By the end of its run, the film had earned well over triple its cost. A serious and highly profitable return for a 1951 release, especially for a genre that was still largely treated as pulp entertainment. It proved to Hollywood that science fiction could draw big numbers, not just with cheap thrills, but with big ideas. And that's the real twist. The movie wasn't just a warning about humanity's future. It was a powerful proof of concept that smart, daring, and thoughtful stories could sell. Science fiction wasn't just for kids anymore, it was big business. The genre game changer that no one saw coming. When it first hit theaters, The Day the Earth Stood Still was only a moderate success. Critics generally liked it, and audiences were intrigued, but it didn't instantly crown itself as an all-time classic. No one at the time knew that it had just quietly changed the future of science fiction forever. Over time, its influence grew exponentially. In 1995, its importance was immortalized when it was selected by the Library of Congress for preservation in the United States National Film Registry, recognized as being culturally, historically, or aesthetically significant. From that point on, sci-fi films were no longer just Saturday matinee fodder. They were increasingly taken seriously as art, as philosophy, and as powerful social commentary. That is the film's ultimate legacy. One flying saucer landing in Washington, one quiet alien plea for peace, and suddenly the entire genre was never the same again. It wasn't just a movie, it was the moment science fiction grew up. The film's unique visual style, sci-fi, noir, Here's a secret that film buffs love to debate. The Day the Earth Stood Still isn't just a science fiction movie. It's also a film noir. Look at the visual style director Robert Wise uses. The deep shadows, the high contrast black and white cinematography, the nighttime city streets, and the sense of a lone protagonist navigating a corrupt and dangerous world. Klaatu, in his trench coat and fedora as Mr. Carpenter, looks less like an alien and more like a private detective from a classic noir film. This was a deliberate choice. By shooting the film with the visual language of a gritty crime thriller, Wise made the extraordinary story feel grounded and serious. It added a layer of realism and adult sophistication that was completely absent from other sci-fi films of the era, which were often brightly lit and looked like fantasies. The Walking Atomic Bomb. Gort is more than just a robot. He's the film's most powerful and terrifying symbol. He represents the very thing the movie is warning against: absolute power without reason or mercy. He is in essence a walking, thinking atomic bomb. Throughout the film, Klaatu explains that Gort is part of an army of similar robots created by an intergalactic federation to enforce peace. If any planet becomes a threat, the robots are empowered to destroy it completely and dispassionately. This makes Gort's silent, looming presence absolutely terrifying. He's not a villain, but he is the embodiment of total annihilation. The famous line, "Klaatu barada nikto," is not just a command. It is the safety phrase that stops a doomsday weapon. The film's tension comes from the knowledge that this unstoppable force of destruction is always just one wrong move away from being unleashed. A surprisingly strong female character for the 1950s. In the landscape of 1950s science fiction, female characters were often reduced to screaming damsels in distress. But Patricia Neal's character, Helen Benson, is a remarkable exception. She is not a scientist or a general, but a widowed single mother who becomes the film's moral compass. When all the powerful men, the generals, the politicians, react with fear and violence, she is the one who reacts with curiosity, courage, and compassion. Klaatu chooses to trust her with his life and his crucial message, not the world leaders. She is brave, independent, and intelligent, and it is her human decency that ultimately offers the only glimmer of hope in the film. For a movie made in 1951, presenting a regular working woman as the key to humanity's salvation was a surprisingly progressive and powerful statement. The original story's twist: the robot was the true master. And at number 1, the secret that recontextualizes the entire film and reveals a much darker story. We watch the film and see Klaatu as the intelligent master and Gort as his robotic servant. But the film is based on a 1940 short story, Farewell to the Master, and its title is far more literal than you can imagine. In the original story, the shocking twist is that the robot, Gnut, was the actual master. Klaatu was just a biological assistant, a disposable clone created by a race of intelligent machines. The story ends with the human protagonist realizing the true power dynamic. The film adaptation reversed this to make the story more relatable, but the original concept presents a staggering and, in 2025, more relevant idea than ever: that the true superior intelligence in the universe might not be biological. The greatest secret of the film is that the silent robot wasn't just the guardian. In the original draft of reality, he was the god from the machine. From Cold War paranoia to Frank Lloyd Wright's spaceship, from real astrophysics on a chalkboard to gibberish that became legend, The Day the Earth Stood Still was never just another sci-fi movie. It was a strange cocktail of fear, creativity, and bold ideas, all wrapped up in a flying saucer. What began as a modest production turned into a blueprint for the genre. It showed that science fiction could be smart, serious, and profitable, while still thrilling audiences with robots and alien warnings. Every sci-fi epic that followed, from 2001, A Space Odyssey to Star Wars, owes a quiet debt to Klaatu and Gort. So, which fact about The Day the Earth Stood Still surprised you the most? Let me know in the comments.